Hello and welcome to Unsourced Wall. My name is Elmas, and as always, I am your host. This is going to be kind of a short one. We have a bunch of things to talk about, but not in quite a bit of detail. But let's start off with some news topics. First off, we have the full reveal of Zack Snyder's take on the Joker in the upcoming Justice League Snyder Cut, which will again see Jared Leto reprise the role off the heels of Suicide Squad. And well, it's a really boring design. It's basically your bog standard modern Joker design with long hair, and that's about it. He doesn't have any more tattoos or anything, which to me seems like a cowardly backslide. Like, what's the point of even trying to connect DCU with these movies? By having Leto, if you're going to wimp out and not even include the most iconically well-known part about his interpretation. But I digress. Snyder also described in detail Leto's scenes and role in the story, but I won't repeat them here, just in case people want to avoid spoilers. But it does sound a little bit goofy that might work if pulled off well, so fingers crossed. Also, Snyder teased a clip of Steppenwolf fighting the Amazons, which actually looks pretty good and well choreographed, so I can't wait to see that. But he revealed the clip in a black and white teaser shot that he says is part of his Justice Gray black and white edition. And I had to say, once again, Justice League in a black and white edition is the dumbest idea I ever heard on black and white editions of movies like Logan or Mad Max Fury Road. I don't see the point, but Justice League is especially egregious because the entire point, or at least one of the biggest selling points of this league, the Snyder Cut, was that we'd finally see Superman in his black costume. And when you remove color entirely, what's the difference? You negate that entire selling point entirely. Also, calling it the Justice is Gray edition is just so mind-numbingly dumb because they're fighting literal space demons. You don't have any gray area there. Anyway, let's move on to our next topic, which is that we had the first full trailer for The Falcon and Winter Soldier, the next MCU-based Disney Plus series. And it looks pretty okay. The action looks nice, the dynamics between Sam and Bucky look okay, and seeing the remaining threads of what they're picking up from the Captain America trilogy are actually ones that needed more development. So that's honestly for the best. What weirds me out is that Sam and Bucky actually seem to have some more personality and attitude compared to the blank slates they were in the movies. And that's shocking. Is that going to be the MCU's new thing? Having boring cardboard cutout nothing characters in the actual movies and then waiting for a long overdue show to actually give them characterization? I hope not, because that would be an annoying trend. That said, it looks alright and I hope it lives up to its potential. And finally, we have to address the elephant in the room regarding this week's scandal about Immortal Hulk artist Joe Bennett, and what a fucking liar he is. In last week's issue of Immortal Hulk, to my everlasting embarrassment, apparently Bennett in the background included anti-Semitic imagery and slurs, and this went fairly unnoticed, but after it was pointed out, it became all too obvious. Now, Bennett has said it was a mistake, but I think the boundary of what you could call a mistake has been crossed when you include both imagery and the slur in combination. Like, that's beyond the pale, and you're just being a fucking liar at that point. Naturally, several Comicsgate bullshitters on social media came to his defense, including Donald T. DeLay, who personally tried to start shit with me. And that really says it all. It's a shame that Immortal Hulk has to be saddled with this, and I will be thinking over my position on supporting the book in the future. I love Ewing, I love the story, I love the message of the story, but Bennett, I just can't go with that guy. The best thing though was how Al Ewing's brother called him out on this shit. So kudos to them. Anyways, move on to whatever this week. First off, we have Rorschach number 5. This was duller than washing paint dry. After the relatively fun and self-aware previous issue, this one takes 3 steps backwards. It's another tedious, repetitive, and almost embarrassingly self-aggrandizing look at Tom King's perception about Watchmen. The entire issue is almost entirely focused on one man's monologue about the comedian and the state of the US. Like, that's it. And it's honestly not that deep. Moore pretty much said all he had to say. So to have a mustache twirling senator in front of a giant smiley face poster lecture about the comedian and who he is and what he meant is so shameless and honestly completely underwritten for the atmosphere and tone it's trying to get across. And once again, only one issue out of almost half this series has done anything to propel the mystery. Remember, this is meant to be a mystery series, and how even the aesthetics of this maxi is supposedly meant to harken back to the 70s mystery novel genre? No, because it hardly remembers that either. One thumb down, one thumb middle. It was more boring than pathetic, to be honest. Next up, we have Sweet Tooth, The Return number 4. Now, this was a pretty damn good issue, but I do have to say one thing off the bat. It's an insane exposition dump. Doesn't even seem like it has a good structural sense of itself outside of expositing everything that it can to the reader. In fact, it feels like one section of exposition right after the other, which on one hand means the issue actually feels full and substantial, satisfying even. On the other hand, it really calls to attention how imbalanced this mini has been. Only 2 issues left, and it really could have been parsed out better, much earlier than this. But no matter. It does a great job at building out the world, the threats, and even some of the tertiary characters get something more weighty and impactful. Like that semi-Gepard elephant gets a hefty backstory that turns him from a slight novelty to honestly very imposing and tragic. Like I'm more thoroughly invested in where he goes from here, which is great. Overall, while this mini hasn't lived up to the heights of the original series, it's at least approaching its emotional intensity, which isn't nothing. It's better than nothing. I can't wait to see where it goes from here. Overall, 1 thumb up, 1 thumb middle. Up next, we have American Vampire 1976, number 5, which is boring exposition. Like, this is such a filler issue that could have, at the most, maybe filled up half a regular issue. It really adds nothing and does nothing that couldn't have been intimated elsewhere. And given this Maxi's already noted propensity for skipping through events to jam in as much narrative as it can, it's kind of ridiculous that it didn't do that here. It's not a bad issue, but it's a pointless one that feels almost incredibly decompressed. 2 thumbs middle. Moving ahead, we have Excalibur, which is boring, some fun gags. That's about it. 1 thumb down, 1 thumb middle. And finally, we have Sword number 3. And this series continues to gain more and more of a distinct and identifiable personality with every issue, which I like. It really helps to ground it as a real team book with an actual story that it wants to tell. Now, I know that's not the highest benchmark, and it's especially unsurprising given Al Ewing's pedigree at this point, but it's nice to see. And the X series right now have been shown to be very loosey-goosey by comparison to this. This issue is mostly a good backgrounding and foundational issue for Manifold, who I only recognize from Hickman's Avengers run. And it's decent stuff. It's not groundbreaking or insanely engaging. It's not making me see Manifold in a whole new light or anything, but it does the job it needs to make Sword feel full and a natural part of the world. And it does that in so many ways. Like, the way it ties into Immortal Hulk is pretty hilarious and completely understandable when we get to it. Like, I wish I could have seen that coming. It's so clear as day. Hell, we even go all the way back to some of the Dawn of X stuff with it. And yeah, no, we totally should have, called that. And it's wonderful. Overall, it's a tight, solid issue. 2 thumbs up. And lastly, we have X-Force number 17. And this was another great issue. Honestly, for as many dips as X-Force can have, and has had, it's still one of the best X titles out there. It's got good characters, good development, an interesting and stakes-filled plot, and a nice sense of direction. So unless you're not at all interested in the genre it's selling, there's something for everyone. And one of the best things about it is that it's able to have enough room to breathe that issues like this, another single character focused issue, and about Quentin Quire feel pretty natural. Now, I feel that Quire has had a bit of a nadir lately, being used as the go-to hip, quirky character, while Percy is doing a good job at grounding and focusing the emotional aspects to him. And it works. It makes this issue a real fun and hefty read that I got a real kick out of, which is a shock because it's basically one long therapy session issue. So kudos to them for firing on all cylinders here, and even getting the chance to strengthen the other half of the myth arc that isn't plant zombies. So yeah, 2 thumbs up. And here are some quick shots, which I haven't done in a while, but I want to wrap things up. We have The Wrong Earth, Night and Day, number 2. And it was fine. We finally get the 2 counterpoint characters meeting, like the Silver Age Batman and the Dark Age Batman. And it's a little bit less impressive. There's not much to reading out of it. It felt very anticlimactic, but there's still a couple good gags in there. And hopefully they ramp up more of the interplay, because it felt very one-sided and not very substantially one-sided at that. And then the last quick cut would be Kick-Ass versus Hit Girl number 4. And that was fine. They still haven't had an actual fight, but I do love their interplay together. They keep bumping into each other, and I think that every time they do, Niles nails each their voices beautifully, perfectly, and it makes their interactions really fun. So, 2 thumbs middle. Anyway, let's move on to what I watched this week with WandaVision episode 5, which was not as good as last week. It's still going places, but I still believe what I said last week about how it's way more interesting to see other characters deal with the situation than a generic gimmick that's already worn out of its welcome. And that carries forward, which is why this issue lags and stalls, because it's half an interesting conceit and half a really dull one. And even then, the interesting stuff has begun to falter as well. To get into it, the half of the episode that concerns Sword and reality feels less creative and self-aware than last week, becoming more blunt, more superficial, and actually really shoddy. It tries really hard to not make Wanda an antagonistic force that resorts to characters basically telling the audience point blank how to feel and how to think, but not actually backing it up on the show in any tangible way, which is a very CW style way of writing. He even goes as far as to try and pretend the only reasonable character in the reality segments is the villain. I mean, he might be. That's a standard twist, but it doesn't do much for the show when it's trying to hint at this during a sequence where they're the only rational person. Other than that, Vision at least picks up some of the slack in the sitcom half and adds some really good character momentum, but it's not to make it as complex as it wants to be. I can't wait for the next episode, and hopefully it picks up. I mean, it's not as bad as it started, but it's still not all that good. So thank you so much for listening. Have a great weekend. I'm so glad anyone is still listening, and it means so much to me. I'm gonna give a shout out to the cover artists for the show at DOTEMCE. Please check them out. They're amazing. And have a great weekend. See you again next time, and have a good one.